there, and welcome to the Kingdom Sexuality podcast. We're Paris and Alana, friends who have a heart for intimacy and long to uncover God's truth and design for sexual freedom within marriage. Welcome here. Okay, so to start off our pornography series, we decided we needed a guest. Well, we probably need a guest for all of these episodes because Paris and I just can't do this by ourselves. So today we have...
topic.
Yeah, it's huge. So today we have Tim Busse with us. And Tim, I actually know Tim. He works at the church that I attend here in Kamloops, at Kamloops Alliance Kamloops Alliance Church. Christian.
That works, yeah.
Okay.
Jesus, yeah, that's that thing. Yeah.
The thing that we go to sometimes, but not anymore. Anyways, so Tim's lovely. When I started going to KAC, he was the youth and young adults pastor, but now he's kind of transitioned into a different role in the church. But I remember when we were in like the youth and young adults era, he did a really great talk one time on pornography. And that's what jogged my brain when we were starting this series. I was like, oh my goodness. I remember Tim had like so much wisdom about this stuff. So we need him to chat to our listeners with all his wisdom. So Tim, I'll let you kind of do a more detailed intro for yourself and what you do and all that good stuff.
Thanks, Alana. I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. I'm glad to be here. And Tim, I've been married for a little over 12 years now, have 3 young kids, 3, 5, and 7. And I love talking about these things. I think they're super important. And maybe just little things human-wise. I like basketball. I do some woodworking and fishing. It's kind of stuff I do for enjoyment. My new role, as you kind of pointed out, Alana, is I was youth pastor for a little over 10 years, and now I'm pastor of spiritual formation here at Kingdom Sexuality Church. And so, I've been in this role now for a little over a year. I started just before COVID hit, so I was like, hey, what am I doing? Oh, yeah, what am I doing? It was,
what's going on now?
Yeah, it was like pivot and then like real serious pivot with COVID. It was a job. Anyway, so. I love what I do. And one of the things I just want to say, I love that you have this podcast. I think in my experience in youth and young adults ministry, we would always make sure we would do a sermon series once a year on this sort of thing, whether it be sexuality or relationships or pornography. And then we would have 1 to 3 days or 3 nights kind of throughout the year that we would focus in on these issues as well. And inevitably some student, like a week or two after we'd have this series, would come to me like, we never talk about these issues. We got to talk about this. And they were like, we just last week, you were there, I'm pretty sure. But I think that just goes to show that we are so saturated with sexual content from our world. And we could speak on it every week from church and it wouldn't do it justice. And so I love that you have a podcast on this and that you're doing this stuff. I think this is great. This is fabulous. So thank you for what you're doing. This is awesome.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's actually been a lot of fun, even though I remember...
God movement. It is.
Yeah. At the beginning, people were like, how are you going to talk about, like, sex every week? Like, you're going to run out of things to talk about. And we're like, no. Like, that's not been a problem at all. Yeah. So, not a problem there at all. So, Tim, can you give us a bit of, what your heart is passionate about in regards to like pornography and people who struggle with that?
Yeah, well, I'm a pastor, so I don't struggle with it at all. It's not an issue, right? No, I'm just kidding. That's clearly a joke. I just want to throw that out there because I let me share my own story. My first experience with pornography, I was in junior high school, walking to school one day before the internet was really huge, and I was walking by a recycle bin. And all of a sudden, I happened to be looking down, and as I took 3 steps past, I went, wait, what was that? I turned and I looked back, and there was a Penthouse magazine in the recycle bin. So I grabbed, which is a pornography magazine, I grabbed, as a 13-year-old or whatever I was, grabbed the thing, shoved it in my backpack, and kept walking to school. Later that day, when I came home, I pulled it out and had a look through. Anyway, so that was kind of the start of my journey. I ended up getting onto the website, onto websites and stuff like that, and unbeknownst to me, there's this thing called history on websites, to which my dad found out about it. And threatened me within an inch of my life. And so that kind of like set up a wave of kind of shutting it down pretty quickly. My parents put some pretty firm controls on things and only allowed me on the computer certain times, which honestly I think parents don't do enough of today. I really think we do a disservice when we don't put parameters around our electronic use for our kids. Even young, the average age of exposure to pornography right now is between 7 and 9 years old. So at 13, although I feel like that's crazy young, 7 to 9 is now the new, because of just the availability of pornography. So anyways, my oldest is 7, and that scares me to death. But I think that's just super important. Anyway, so my parents kind of really clamped down hard on it. And so, pornography then at that point really was shut out of my life, for most intensive purposes, but I was able still to access it here and there. Okay, so here's let me get kind of just honest and vulnerable with you. So masturbation was not an issue for me. I actually remember being told about it, and I tried it, and it didn't work. I didn't understand how it worked, and so I was like, why would I do that? Until I got married, and then I got married, and then it was like, oh, this is weird. It's like, okay, this is how it works, and then it became a struggle. So, anyways, that being said, God has been gracious, and I've been free for a while, and but I still have things like I use Covenant Eyes. It's a great online software that's just protection on there for your web and your phone. So I've got it on my phone, I've got it on my iPad, I've got it on my computer. And so, I just can't really go on those things right now. My Covenant Eyes sends a report as often as you want, so whether it's daily or weekly or monthly. So I have it weekly, I believe. Sends it to my wife, and then sends it to a friend who I meet with weekly, and we we'll get into some more of that stuff as we go. But
that's amazing.
That's a bit of my journey. So I think I'm passionate about it because I think as we think about following Jesus, I think we need to talk about those really culturally relevant things. And I really believe that as we rightly understand what sex is and how to, why did God make it? Because He made it, and then how is it supposed to operate in our life? That when we do it well, and we understand who Jesus is and our relationship with Him, it just changes everything, and it's awesome. And so I think sex is such an important, in particular, pornography is such an important topic to dig into. Because it has such an ability to take us out. So.
Yes. Okay.
No, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's so important. Like, actually going back to, we've been asking our followers a lot of questions on our Instagram page, and a lot of times, you can see like the deep roots of shame coming forth as they are actively taking a step and being vulnerable and saying, this is me. I have struggled with this, and just, being able now to share like this openly, which we thank you from the bottom of our hearts, like that Christ has put you into our paths and into now this overflow of people that can hear your testimony and be blessed by it and be like, there is freedom. Like, we are human, and to like, so many people I find will just take, we'll go sins like pornography and struggling with pornography. You mentioned masturbation, right? And they'll just level them as if they're just these horrendous things, and you're like less than human because you've done them. And we've heard so many stories like that. And, now just bringing your story to the table, like, no, like this, we're human, you guys. Like, this is real life. And that's why we're raw and vulnerable and sharing this now and tackling. There is redemption to have, right?
One of the lines we throw around at our church is that we're not a museum of saints. We're a hospital for the broken and sinners.
Love
right?
it.
And so,
absolutely.
As a pastor, I feel like I got to lead the way in that. And we're so used to like leading the way in holiness. Look at me and my, amazingness, instead of like, actually look at me, I'm broken and I need Jesus too. And so I just think that that's really important for me to say, I'm not coming here because I'm somehow amazing and I've made it. I'm coming here because I'm a sojourner, and I've learned some things along the way for sure. I've researched and read and talked to lots of great people, but I've gotten help. And I just think, man, this is a part of the journey. Let's come together and understand this. And I would also say, that's my journey. And I love that I'm actually talking to two females about this because it's more and more becoming a female issue too. And I talk with many females and counsel many females who have wrestled with this as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Which is huge. And that was actually, we had a lot of our followers reach out to us and they're just like, can we also just stop acting like this is a man issue?
Yeah.
Like this is a human issue. You know, we all, like, there's so many people that are like, we're all struggling with it. There's men, there's women, and they're like, can you bring that to the table? And we're like, yes, like, you should not feel like you're the only woman dealing with this, because that's definitely a lie too, which could become a very dangerous path, you know, that the enemy's going to target. So thank you for saying that, because it's so true.
Yeah, in fact, Paris, let me point out something. I'm going to kind of throw out some stats later. And a lot of them are actually done on men, because that's the primary place of research that's been happening, because it's been primarily recognized as a man's issue. And so just want to point that out there, that's where most of the research is. That does not mean that it's not a women's issue. And I would say one of the ways that the devil keeps us from finding freedom is that he keeps it a secret in our lives. We don't tell anybody. The devil loves secrets, and secrecy is really closely connected to shame, which we'll talk about later as well. And so it's you want to find freedom, don't make it a secret. You got to tell somebody. You got to bring someone in, and we'll dig into that more a little bit too. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love that, because that goes alongside everything we talk about here. Is like, have an accountability partner, bring things to the open. Like, the first step to freedom is acknowledging that and getting open about it, because then you're really releasing those shackles of secrecy, because that is a huge tactic the enemy uses. So I love that you said that.
Yeah, that was something I was actually going to ask, because you mentioned, like, you have like this person you meet up with and the stuff goes to your wife as well. It's like, what does that look like for you, or what advice would you have for someone finding an accountability partner if this is something they struggle with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, in one of the questions that we'll dig into, I want to dig into that more, because I think the issue there is intimacy. The issue with pornography is intimacy. It's actually not pleasure. Shame, and I'll talk about some stuff in a bit too with shame and how that's all connected. And I really think actually a linchpin issue is getting that person who you can journey with. I actually think accountability is a misnomer word, because it connotes judgment, and it connotes like, I'm going to hold you accountable. When you mess up, I'm going to tell you you've done wrong. And actually that contributes to our shame, which actually contributes to our inability to get out of it. So I've heard people say, like, don't hold them accountable, hold them capable. And so to me, I think with the power of the Holy Spirit, we are capable, right? And so, it's not wrong to call it an accountability partner, but I think, if you can find that person who you're not just sharing your sins, but you're sharing your life with, that you're learning to be, to understand each other, to love and encourage one another, like those types of things I think are really important. Shame is one of three main reasons why people struggle with pornography use, and so we just need we need someone. So how do you find that person? Well, you get involved in your church's streams of relationship, whether it be a small group or a men's ministry or a women's ministry or whatever it is. Find somebody who you have a connection with. Take them for coffee and just chat about life. Get to know them. Ask them some questions about their life and see if maybe this is a person that you could journey with. Or maybe you have a friend. In fact, I was counseling someone recently who said, man, in this COVID season, they had moved cities and they're struggling to find relationship and find that person to really journey with. And so we've been praying and talking about it. And finally, he had this friend and he's like, I'm not sure if this person could be that. And then he just got brave and he said, man, I'm just struggling. Like, I feel like all my friends have moved away and I just don't have anybody to connect with on a real deep Jesus following kind of level. He just laid it all out there. And he said he was so blown away because the person was like, oh man, you too? And he just was like, came out of like, this is totally the struggle I have as well. And so it was just this beautiful, like, hey, now I have this person that I can journey with, and we can wrestle together. So I think be the courageous person to take that initial step of, hey, let's go for coffee. And then also give them the gift of going first and sharing your struggle. And I think that's where it's got to start.
Absolutely. I love that. That's such a good point. And I really like that you shared with us, like, how going back to the accountability conversation, how that can often just be, that word can be like a misnomer of, oh, that's shame, that's okay. I like that you said that, because me personally, I don't think of that word that way, but you saying that, I'm like, oh gosh, I know people who feel that way, and that just hasn't clicked with me. And I love that you said it's what did you say? It's a capability. Like, you're
hold the person capable.
Capable, holding them capable.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's
so good.
We've gone this. Let's dig into this maybe. So there's kind of three main reasons that a person goes into a person struggles with pornography. One is lack of purpose. Two is sexual abuse in their past or present, and three is shame. And so these indicators are significant. So, for instance, a lack of purpose, and this one actually is in particular a man's issue, although does go across the gender barrier. But Genesis 3 is a great scripture verse. It talks about the curse of man. And how it actually characterizes futility, right? So in Genesis 3:17 and 19 states that the curse for man is all your life you will struggle to scratch a living from it. It will grow thorns and thistles for you. By the sweat of your brow you will have food to eat until you return to the ground from which you were made. If you struggle to have purpose, if you're in a career and you just feel stuck and you're not sure if this has meaning or value or purpose, you end up having like a soul ache, right? And so the easy way to fill that is through pornography, right? Here's something that makes me feel good. Right. It overcomes this lack of zeal in my life, and therefore I can mask it with this. Sexual abuse is another thing. Sexual abuse. So just a quick synopsis as to how it works. It's people think of it. Typically, it happens by a stranger. That's actually it is not the way it typically happens. It's almost always by someone trusted, a parent, an aunt or an uncle, a brother, sister, a babysitter, a coworker. Like it's actually usually a person, even a pastor, right? It's someone who's built trust with the person, and everything about the relationship at the beginning feels good, feels right. There's trust. This person's really cared for them. They've really supported them. And then there's slowly little things that start to take them in a not so good direction. A touch of an arm, hey, you're really strong, right? Like these encouragements that maybe are like not totally wrong, but like, hey, why are you encouraging me about that? They start to take them down a slow trail. And then all of a sudden, what felt so good begins to actually feel wrong. And you're not sure why, and you're confused. Like, wait, but this person loved me and cared for me, and now we're doing these things that don't feel right, and I'm not sure. And so pornography actually does the same thing. Initially, you have an urge, you have a desire, and you get into pornography, and it feels good at first, but then it starts to feel wrong. It doesn't feel right, and so it just repeats itself. So sexual abuse is a part of that. And then the one that really, I think, undergirds all of them is shame. So if you feel shame, this is really what leads you back. Now, let me just describe what shame is. Okay, so we all feel guilt, and a lot of people do feel shame. So guilt is about what you do. Shame is about who you are. Yes. So if you do something wrong and you feel guilty about it, what happens is you feel guilty and you go, oh man, I did that wrong and that wasn't okay. Right. So, my wife and I, we often, I'll say something that's dumb. I'll be overcritical or whatever. And so I just go, man, I shouldn't have done that. That was hurtful for her. I was too critical and I should not have done it. Okay, so that's guilt, right? Because what I'm focused on is what I have done. Whereas what shame does is it comes in and it flips that, which, by the way, guilt is good. Shame flips that and it says, not only what you did was bad, but now I am bad.
You are bad. That's right. It's an identity. Yeah.
Exactly. And so now, I'm a horrible person. I'm a horrible husband, blah, blah, and you just go down that rabbit trail. I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that, and you begin to go on this rabbit trail of beating yourself up. And there's lots of research out there that shows actually people with high amounts of guilt actually, and then this is worldly statistics, but have high amounts of success. So whether it be business or relationships, etc. Whereas shame is actually linked to a lot of addiction. So if you struggle to beat yourself up, you're more likely to be caught in pornography or other addictions as a result of it. So Covenant Eyes is a great website. I already mentioned it. If you haven't looked them up, look them up. They have some great resources on their stuff. Covenanteyes.com. I read a blog this week, and he talked about it. And this is what he says about shame. In fact, he was the one who gave these three things. The guy's name is Jay Stringer. He did a study on 3,600 men and women. There's the one piece he did on both. Who had unwanted sexual behavior. So whether that be pornography, affairs, buying sex, and this is where that came out of. And so this is what he says about shame. He says it has to be said, shame, not pleasure, drives pornography use.
Yes.
We think it's a pleasure issue. I just want pleasure. I just want to feel good. Right? Hedonism is so big in our world right now, which is this like drive of I just want to. My life is about pleasure and the next adventure and the next thing. And so he says we think it's that. It's not that. It's actually shame. Shame drives pornography use. And he goes on. He says, as a clinician and researcher, I am convinced of this reality. We are bonded to shame and judgment far more than erotic material. How good is that? Hey, like we so think this is, I just want this, and if I live in this thing, and we have these questions and these lies that the devil feeds us, right? Actually, this is what we're made for. We're made to have sex and all these kinds of things, and this is so great. When actually research shows, no, that's not the driving factor in pornography. The driving factor in pornography is shame and self-judgment.
Yes.
Right? Like that just changes the game in my mind. And to me, then I go back to scripture and I go, okay, Jesus, John 3:16, the most famous verse in the Bible, right? He came to give life. And then John 3:17, which is a verse we often skip over, Jesus says, I came not to condemn the world, but to save it.
That's right.
Yeah.
But condemnation is shame, right? I am condemned. Now, here's the great thing. If you read scripture, it doesn't often differentiate between guilt and shame, because Jesus saves us from both, right?
Yes.
He saves us from our shame. We are not broken and beat up and bruised, and we are actually healed from these things because of Isaiah 53, right? By his wounds, we are healed. And so we actually find wholeness, restoration. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, the old has gone, the new has come. And even in that newness, if you read 2 Corinthians 5, he says the old has gone, the new has come. He's talking about the death and resurrection of Jesus, that he's payment for our sin. But in that, interesting enough, he gives us purpose. He says we are now ambassadors of Christ. We are ministers of reconciliation. So he gives us purpose, right? Which then again goes back to that lack of purpose, right, that we feel. And so the oldness is gone, the new has come. We're getting these beautiful things that Christ has come through. And I'm getting all excited.
Amazing. Keep going.
Yeah.
We're here for it.
So I just want to read a little bit more, another great quote from Jay Stringer. And this is what he goes on in this shame piece. He says, when we experience shame, it attempts to convince us that we are unwanted. In response, we pursue behaviors that confirm it. Although contemporary addiction thinking is that we go to pornography for escape or medication, I found that men and women pursue pornography for the purpose of judgment. We intuitively know that each time we indulge in pornography, we feel less lovely and connected. Therefore, our pursuit of pornography is intended to convince us that the holy longings of our heart will never come to pass. Knowing our hope has been compromised, we experience shame.
Right. It's like self-sabotage.
100% self-sabotage. So here's the antidote, he said. The antidote to shame is to turn towards it by telling others the places where we harbor it. The antidote is intimacy. I have a passion to dig into these issues because I see this as an intimacy issue, and I just see scripture as an intimacy issue. I'm studying right now the Old Testament, and my prof, and I'm taking a master's degree from Northern Seminary, and my prof just said this great thing. He said, we look at the laws of the Old Testament and we don't understand it. And he said, but the laws always have to be connected to covenantal theology. Covenantal theology is relational theology, right? A covenant is a contract, right? Is God says, if you do this, then I will be your God and you will be my people. In other words, it's a relationship. And so we often get in purity, we do this purity culture of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. It so wrecked our ability to understand pornography because we divorced it from relationship, right? And I love that Stringer goes here and he just says, no, hold on. The whole issue is intimacy with God and with other people. This is what we need. And when we share these secrets, when we share these things we've been hiding, we've been embarrassed about, we've been ashamed about, actually that's where the beginning of freedom and renewal and newness happens. And again, 2 Corinthians 5, Paul writes, he says, the old is gone, the new has come. And then he says, you are now ministers of reconciliation. This is your role. And reconciliation is a relational metaphor, right? You're bringing people back together. What has been relationally broken is now coming back in unity. And so this is what actually makes us free. This is what actually makes us new, that we find newness in relationship. We got to get into relationship. If you're sitting here and you're going, I am so lost in addiction to pornography, I would advise you, don't even worry about the particulars of how to get out of it at this moment. The very first thing you need to do is tell somebody. You just got to figure it out. If you've got to crawl to your neighbor's house, you don't even know if they follow Jesus, just tell them. You got to tell your spouse, just spill the beans. You've got to find some way to tell somebody, because it's just so mission critical to finding freedom, because it's got to be about intimacy and friendship with your spouse, with somebody who you trust, that will help you journey in these things. And if you tell that person and they're like, I don't know what to do with you or how to do with this, just say, it's okay, just listen to me, and just spill your guts. And I think you'll find that to be a huge step forward.
It's crazy. It makes it seem, I know it's probably much more complicated than all of this, but it makes it seem so simple, right? This is the problem, right? This is the shame is what is the root of what draws people to continue in this pornography addiction. And if it's if what's the word? If the solution to the problem is just, telling someone, getting it off your chest, getting it out in the air to someone, it makes it seem obviously there's probably a lot of healing that needs to come after that. But the fact that that's where you start, that's pretty doable. I feel it's a hard thing to do, obviously, to tell someone what you're struggling with, but it's at least there's start here and then see what happens. I think that's really beautiful.
And I think a key to that, because we actually get into unhealthiness because of relationship, and we get into unhealthiness because of relationship, and we get into healthiness because of relationship.
Because of relationship, that's right.
It's actually both the source and the cause of our woundedness, and it's the source and the cause of our healthiness, right? Yes. And the foundational piece of that is God, right? We find unhealthiness because we are divorced from God, we've run and we've rebelled, and we actually find healthiness because we are intimate with Him. And so relationships are the undergirding this. I started a new ministry at our church called Rooted, and we've kind of cast it as this ministry of learning to practice the faith. And everybody in our Western world comes with our Western ideals, which is individualization, right? I'm going to do this by myself. I'm going to learn how to do these correct things, and I'm going to apply them to my life. What they don't realize is that they're going to get the foundational practice of the whole thing is relationship, right? That actually you have to do these practices together. Otherwise, you're going to misunderstand the practices in and of themselves. And so, not that you don't do things on your own, right? You read your Bible on your own, you pray to Jesus on your own, right? Or you're doing that with Him, but you have to do things in community as well, because that's the point of how God has created us. And so, we in the West don't like that. We want to be individuals. We want to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We want to know, I'm strong. I can do this. I can figure it out. But actually, you are not a self-made person. You cannot be. In fact, if you want a secular viewpoint of what that is, look at Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. In there, he talks about the unknown story of success of how actually it's not because you've been born this way or you have some natural peace within you. He talks about your birth order in there as actually, you know, he talks about NHL players and how they're NHL players because they're born. Most of them were born in the first 4 months of their of the year, and that just there's a trickle effect. Anyways, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit trail.
So interesting stuff. Like I find that stuff so interesting.
Yeah, good. It's helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tim, with what you've shared with us so far, this is really amazing. And you guys, Tim and Alana and I, we had a phone call together just going over this and just, you know, really laying out our vision of this and what the Holy Spirit has been really just knitting together amongst this ministry and bringing people in. And Tim shared a really amazing acronym with us, and it was HALT. Tim, could you elaborate on that? Because I feel like that would wrap this conversation up really well.
Yeah. So HALT is just kind of, you know, what are the triggers? You know, what triggers you often to go into these things? So when you're, you know, shame is the undergirding piece and the stuff, but sometimes we just need those practical things. Okay, yes. When do I actually go to pornography? Like, what's the actual thing? So HALT is a acronym that helps us understand it. So it just stands for hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. It's like really simple. Like sometimes you actually just go to pornography because one, there's maturity that lacks, right? Because there's shame, there's undergirding shame there. But the trigger from that shame is I'm hungry. You know, I need food. So your body's lacking energy, your body's lacking power and sustenance, and so your barriers, your strength is not there to resist temptation, and therefore you actually get into it. So angry is a part of that, right? In particular for guys, and anger is something that a lot of guys struggle with. Scripture talks lots about that, about anger. In your anger, do not sin, Ephesians 4:26. So you get angry with a spouse, or angry with your child, or angry with a coworker, or who knows what can make you angry because your car won't start, right? Like lots of things can make you angry. And or just bubble, you know, lots of little things throughout your day. You're just frustrated at the end of your day, which, by the way, frustration is a word we would prefer to use, but frustration is anger. I'm just frustrated today. Okay, actually, you're angry. That's
angry.
What angry is.
Right. Let's be honest.
We try to downplay it, but it's straight up anger. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's more culturally acceptable word for it.
Yeah.
Totally.
We when we get angry, we want to feel good. In fact, funny enough, anger is a secondary emotion.
Yes.
So we feel anger when we want to cover up something else that feels less powerful and less controlling, right? So for me, I get angry when I feel embarrassed. In my shame, I get embarrassed. That's where I go. I feel uncomfortable. I feel embarrassed. I feel dumb, right? That's my shame word that or whatever it is. So I feel embarrassed. So instead of feeling embarrassed, I get angry. Because anger feels like I'm in control. I'm more powerful. I can, I have the right things to say now. So I get angry instead of being okay with, okay, wait, I'm actually embarrassed right now. And just being okay with that. Okay, so what's my embarrassment about? Where's that coming from for me? What's that about? Okay, there's shame there. Okay, maybe actually I can speak some scripture to that. Well, I'm ashamed because maybe I did something at work that didn't go well. Didn't have a great, or I got a bad grade on assignment, or my wife is frustrated because I didn't, bring home dinner when I was supposed to, or pick up a kid from school, or whatever, right? And so there's some embarrassment there of a missed thing. Okay, I did that, and that wasn't good. Okay, that sucks, and it's okay that sucks, and I can feel embarrassed about that. So we can do that and just recognize that actually that's where I'm at right now. And allow my anger to subside and realize that I'm doing that to try and patch something in my soul. But when we feel angry, it revs us up. But when we get angry, it actually will also eventually will kind of run out of steam. And then when we run out of steam, we go to pornography because we want to fill that, right? I got nothing left. I'm angry. I'm got no energy left in me, and so now this is something that will make me feel good, right? Anger was that thing, but that's done. Now the next thing is pornography. So then there's loneliness, right? My biggest temptation, and I said this to my wife and to my friends, when my wife goes away for the weekend and I'm home alone, I don't know what it is, but when I'm home and the kids are home and my wife's home, I'm not nearly as tempted. But when they're gone, the temptation just spikes. And a lot of times I'm like, I don't get it. Like, why? Like, last weekend was the same weekend. I had different things I was doing. But the only difference is that my wife and kids aren't home. So I'm lonely and therefore I'm tempted. So loneliness is that, right? Because it just brings up that like in our soul. What is it? Tired. And then tired is the last one, right? When you're tired, again, your defenses are down. You've had an exhausting day. You want to feel good. And your defenses, shame comes out easier, right? All these things. And therefore we go to our devices to self-medicate. So that's the halt thing. I want to maybe share a couple more things on how we actually get out of the kind of in the immediacy of things. There's a great book years ago in purity culture that was called Every Young Man's Battle, although I recognize that it's not just a young man's battle, nor is it a man's battle. It's both a woman's battle and a man's battle. In fact, I was chatting with someone recently who Sid Coop, actually, he Canadian Youth Workers Conference, does a lot of youth ministry stuff. He wrote a great thing on pornography, like a little curriculum, I guess you could call it. So look up Canadian Youth Workers Conference. And they have a pornography thing that you can download that will help you if you want to journey with somebody through some of this. It's fabulous. Sid is a great leader in these things. And he told me that he had someone reach out to him. He's in a small group of people 75 years and older who are struggling with pornography. And he said, we need help. We all feel embarrassed about this. We feel like nobody else our age struggles with this. How do we do? So it's not a young man's battle. It's not just a man's battle. It's everybody's battle today, especially with the availability of pornography. So anyways, Every Young Man's Battle, in there they talk about the sumo sex drive and how our sex drives are actually we've consumed so much sexualized content that our sex drive has ballooned to being way bigger than it actually was originally designed to be. And so simply a part of actually helping us overcome that is to starve our sex drive a little bit, which I don't recommend if you want to like lose weight like a sumo wrestler might. Starving is not a good diet recommendation, but in our sexualized culture it is, right? Like we just need to try and limit the different places we go. Like if like you go into the mall in Kamloops, right? If you're walking by what's that lingerie shop?
Right, like Levy and Rose or La Senza.
Yes, right. You're going to walk by that. They have massive posters out there, right? And it's like, okay, how do I like avert my eyes, right? Like tell whoever you're going with, hey, you got to help me because I know I'm going to lose steam when it comes, and I'm just going to look. So we either got to avoid going there, or you got to like cover my eyes and leave me like I'm blind. It's going to look really dumb, in the mall, right? Whatever. Now that being said, there are times when we can avoid it, right? In Kamloops, it gets really hot in the summertime. You could be walking downtown Kamloops, and someone's walking by who's not wearing a lot of clothing, right? And it's just hard. And so there's a technique they call bouncing your eyes, right? It's easy to do a second look. It's unfortunate. You're going to take it in. It just is what it is. So how do you bounce your eyes? So you see it and you bounce. And in that, I really want to encourage you. Don't judge yourself, right? Don't shame. Don't judge. Don't. It's like, okay, I saw it. It is what it is. Move on. Even if you did a double take, okay, I saw that. I don't want to do that, but I can still choose to bounce now, right? Yeah. And every time I can choose to bounce now. I don't need to look to you and tell somebody in the moment, right? Choose to do what might seem like the embarrassing thing. Say, hey, there's a person over there, there's a thing over there, there's a poster over there, there's whatever, and it's just not good for my heart and my soul right now. Can you just help me? Can we go a different route or whatever, right? And just help yourself with that. The other thing that has been probably the most helpful thing for me, honestly, is this idea of diverting instead of damning. So when we get into these situations, we often, it's like, okay, I'm feeling the pull. I'm being tempted. I'm being aroused. And I'm feeling the pull into pornography. And what we end up saying to ourselves is, no, 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 right? Which almost never works, right? And when we're saying no, we're essentially damning, right? There's the flow, right? The river's flowing, it's building, the rain clouds have come, and the water's swelling, and it's like, no, 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 but I'm getting swept down this river, and then we try to dam, but it doesn't work. If you've ever tried to dam up a river, right? You've done it with, as a kid or whatever, you built rocks along a little river, you tried to build it up, and it builds a little pool, and it actually does a little bit of help, right? At the beginning, kind of slows things down. But what happens with the rocks?
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Burst. Yeah.
Yeah, right. They're immersed, or the water eventually builds up and overflows, or breaks through one opening and gushes through that thing, right? And so damming doesn't work. Here's what does work: diverting. So one time, a friend and I, we were really bored, and we were young adults, and we went to a creek near here, and we actually diverted the flow to one little channel. And there was up on this bank, and what we realized, this was really bad. Okay, I don't recommend this. We diverted it. It actually dried up a whole half of the river, and we all of a sudden saw these little tiny fish and these little things. They're flapping all over, and we're like, "Oh my goodness, what did we just do?" And we realized it would take too long to try and break the dam and have it go back. And so we just grabbed this bottle and we started throwing these little fish, and we tried to save them anyway. But we diverted it, and it worked quite well. We were shocked. Yeah. But diverting it to something that has more power and strength and can captivate your mind and take you in a more positive direction. Okay, so for me, often it's things like I used to be big into whitewater kayaking. Okay, so when I was a young adult in particular, I would just think about whitewater kayaking. What's the new river I'm going to paddle down, or the wave I'm going to surf? Or, now for me, it's fishing or basketball. Or I start to think about, okay, maybe what's a new lake I want to go check out, or maybe a new project I want to build in my garage, or something like that.
Right.
Something that just easily grabs your attention like that and diverts. Or maybe you're going to look up a different kind of video, right? And so you can divert it way easier than you can dam. And it just helps to divert and get you out of that sticky situation in the moment. And helps to make a change. So halt, right? Hungry, angry, lonely. Know your triggers, right? And know when they're coming, right? Like for me, right around lunchtime, right before lunchtime, about 11:30, I get hungry every day. I have a high metabolism, and so I have a snack drawer in my office. So no, I just eat, and so I have my pre-lunch lunch, and I just eat a healthy snack, and it just helps, right? It just keeps me so I'm not hungry, right? And when my wife goes away for the weekend, I know that, hey, I text my buddy, like, wife's gone for the weekend, check in on me, right? Yeah. And that check in on me helps me know a buddy's coming and he's got my back. I'm not alone by myself. So those kinds of things I think really can help us get out of those. And I've talked with couples who have felt like they've gone too far before marriage, and they've started to understand the triggers. Like for one couple I can remember, they were pushing the envelope. They didn't like where they're going, and they realized she would have a bad day. He would want to console her, so he would come over. He would console her, and one thing would lead to another. That she was feeling down. He was trying to be helpful, and then they started to go to a place that they didn't want to go to. And they realized, wait a minute, actually, this is a place we'd go to. So they realized, okay, hon, I can't come over when you're feeling bad, right? As awkward as it is, I'm just going to stay on the phone and listen to you, because we do bad things when we get in the same room and you're not feeling good. And they reported afterwards, like, Tim, it actually made it really easy. I just didn't get in the car and drive. I gave the keys to my roommate, And so I think we can do these things that help us get out of these situations that kind of mitigate the immediacy, at least of it anyways. These things won't solve the root issue, right? If you bring relationship into it, it will begin, but it will help to get you out of that immediate environment, and start to bring some health and some distance from them. So, and then Covenant Eyes, right? Or something like that. There's a number of them out there. FightingTheNewDrug.ca is another great website for resources. And go and get yourself a web browser, right? Like sometimes I search things that I'm not looking for something, and it's like, sorry, you can't search that. I'm like, I'm being innocent here. Come on, but that's a way better. That's a way better thing to have happen than to because there has been times where I've searched things and I know I'm going down a path that I shouldn't be going down, and the web browser's like, sorry, you can't search that. I'm like, oh crap. Okay, yes, right. I'm out here. Close the laptop. Off I go. Right, and I'm out. That's so it's good. It's just like that warning of, right, no, this is not where I want to be right now. So good.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. I feel like this was just a really practical, just brought it right down, right? And I think I really appreciate that, and I just love listening to you talk about it, because I can tell that it's something that you are passionate about, and I love that, and I think it's really, it makes it come across really really easily. You just can talk about it so easily, and it's really easy to listen to you talk about it because it's something that's so on your heart. And I love that. And I really hope our followers like it as well, because I feel like this is just such a really practical way to just, you laid it out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Keeping it real life. And then too, like, for people to know that this is a no judgment zone. We keep saying that over and over again. It's like, you guys, it's just like what you said, Tim, like, speak all of this into life, get it out, like, rip those secrets apart. Like, the more we are in community with each other and then upholding each other and know that you're in a safe place, like, that's where a lot of healing ultimately begins.
Hey friends, thank you so much for hanging out with us as we dive deeper into meaningful, godly intimacy, tackle the hard questions, and embrace truth while we're at it. We're also on Instagram at Kingdom Sexuality. You'll find our Instagram handle below in the show notes, where you'll also see any other resource links we may have mentioned in today's episode. As always, our hearts are to cultivate deep community and freedom with you guys, and we cannot wait to continue this journey alongside you. We'll see you in the next episode.